If you try to fail and succeed, which have you done? From one perspective, it's success. If you attempted something and reached the intended outcome, then it can be counted as a success, right? But at the same time, that particular intended outcome is failure. So didn't you technically fail? Succeeding in failure seems like something rather undesirable in the grand scheme of things. Yet the opposite couldn't be more true. It is because of the grand scheme that failure is not only desirable, but necessary. Failure is famously associated with fear, ridicule, shame, and other unpleasant feelings. Being from the high-achieving age, these feelings apparently exist for a reason, to keep you away from failure and in the high-achievement zone. In almost all scenarios, failure isn't the desired final outcome. Sometimes it acts as the means to an end, but never as the end itself, whether in school or in a job or any other aspect of your life. When someone strives to accomplish something, failure is not the word generally associated with that accomplishment. In a lot of situations, failure is generally the negative precursor to a final accomplishment. Something like this. This is the simplified diagram of a typical valued action and the hopeful end result. If something comes up, for example a class, that you want to explore or learn more about, generally success is the final goal. Sometimes it's a success as in a grade, or simply intellectual success. Occasionally our successes can take just a little more effort. Something more like this. This is a simplified diagram of another frequent series of actions. When you try, fail, are willing enough to try again and learn from the failure, and then ultimately succeed. But this is not my point or my goal. This is my goal. I do not want failure to be seen as a means to an end, but rather the end itself. Failure should be the ultimate goal, not simply a step in the middle that allows that ultimate goal to be achieved. The longer you go through life without failing, the less likely you are to explore all your options. So my perception of the future is less like this. Failure is not an option. But more like this. Failure is the only option. We exist in the overachieving generation, where you not only have to be good at everything you do, you have to be good at everything. The requirements of the modern age have heightened the word success so much that failure is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. It's the elephant in the room. Failure is not the underlying staple of the success forum, but has instead morphed into a taboo concept that cannot be fully understood by the people who have never before seen it. Those people are us. We are the ones who cannot completely comprehend failure because we refuse to see it. We are the overachieving generation. This is not a speech about the importance of failure as a tool leading to success, but rather a speech about the importance of failure for the sake of failure. In the overachieving generation of today, people like us, our age, the young folk of modern America, are what really matter. We control not just the future as we're continually informed, but we control the present. And if we can't embrace failure, if we continue to live in perpetual denial of what should be a part of our lives, then we as a culture are destined, ironically, to fail. So how do you embrace something so incomprehensibly taboo? How do you accept something that has been beaten out of your head since childhood? This is my solution. Step 1 is the easy part. Find something you're interested in. A class, an activity, whatever, but something you've never done before in your whole life. It can be a vague interest, a burning desire, or anything in between. Then comes the second, much harder part. Fail. Do not succeed. In fact, not only fail, fail epically. Don't be afraid to try and succeed. It's even best if you do try to persevere. The trick is finding that new thing in step 1 that no matter how hard you try, you won't do as well as you wanted. And if you try again, or do other things, or never come back to it, fine. That's completely up to you. The only things that concern me are those 2 steps. You must fail at something where you wish to succeed, and you must accept that failure. You have to look at it and understand that just because you wanted to do well, doesn't mean you can or will. And just because you fail doesn't mean your world is going to come crumbling down around you. Failure can be frustrating and strenuous. It can be nerve-wracking, and when you're stuck in the middle of it, it can feel like it's not worth it. But that's not why it exists. If failure existed solely for the purpose of making us feel bad about ourselves, we would get nowhere. Sure, failure is there to help us figure out what we can't do, but more specifically, failure is there to help us figure out what we can do. In 1967, psychologist Lawrence J. Peter introduced the idea of the Peter Principle. The next year, he and writer Raymond Hall published the book The Peter Principle: Why Things Always Go Wrong. The ideas they discuss are applied to the business world and the hierarchy of job placement and failure. The Peter Principle dictates that every employee will be promoted to his own level of incompetence. What that means is, as an employee anywhere, you will excel at your job until you are promoted, and the cycle will continue until you are no longer able to excel at the job you are promoted to. It's at that point when most, if not all, employees are fired. Instead of being demoted to a job where they once again will excel, they're eliminated from the picture entirely. The Peter Principle says that because of this rise to incompetence, the inevitable outcome is that every job within a company will be filled by someone unfit for it, and the company will never succeed. This is where learning to fail comes into the equation. Failure in the real world doesn't mean simply going back and trying that level again, or respawning, or coming back in a couple days to give it another go. Failure can be unforgiving, and it can be destructive. But if you learn that in a safer environment, something like school, then real-world failure is less of a brick wall and more of a hurdle. It will stand in your way as a threatening possibility, but you've experienced it, and you can deal with it. Failure tests borders and limits, physically and mentally. It can be straining and upsetting at times, but immensely rewarding. From one perspective, failure is nothing more than not living up to some set of standards, but from another, it is an opportunity to expand horizons and learn. There is an understanding of others that accompanies trying something new, and an even deeper understanding of self that accompanies realizing you can't succeed the first time you try, or perhaps not the second, or third, or even at all. But it's about growth. Failure should be understood at a younger age so the buildup of ego from unrelenting success can be stopped before it stops you. The longer your string of successes without a break, the less you will have to ultimately offer the world. From unbroken success comes ego-driven fear. But from failure comes humility and self-knowledge. And from humility and self-awareness comes growth. So if you try to fail and succeed, you've really done both. And that's not such a bad thing, because failure's not such a bad thing.